In Nepal, uh, everyone runs late, and but then it's not really late because if you don't have watches and clocks, are you late? That's the the country didn't didn't operate according to time. I remember I was trekking in the trekking one early days, and you'd ask people as you're going along, you say, well, how far is it to this village or wherever you're trying to go to, or this bridge or this river or whatever? How far is that? You'd always say 2 hours. Always say 2 hours. And sometimes it'd be a half hour. I remember one time, so I was trying to get to this village where I was going to sleep that night. And it was dusk and it was late in the afternoon. And I said, well, how far is it to this village? 2 hours. And it was 4 hours. It's like 2 hours, it's because, and I realized it took me a long time to realize they don't have any clocks or watches in the mountains. But to be polite, then they would, they tell you something because they won't want to say, I don't know, because that was like impolite. I'm trying to take care of you. So anyway, you learn about time. So you make appointments to meet someone at, 10 o'clock, and at 11 o'clock they show up, sort of thing. Anyway, I think, okay. So anything from last week that percolated that you want to clarify or no? Yeah.
I was just thinking on the idea.
Oh, what? Does it record? They can hear it. And also we're recording. Thanks, Diane.
Thank you. I was just thinking from last class,
Hold it close to you now.
the idea of appearances
Oh,
and misunderstanding the appearances
yeah.
and how the misunderstanding creates the aggravation, the anger, the whatnot, and how to. So I've just been, going through my days now, just how am I misunderstanding this appearance? How,
Yeah.
why is this appearing to me like this?
Mhm.
Why are these coming up to me like this?
Another part of that is, well, I mean, I think is how is it an appearance? We can say an appearance, right? But we want to also kind of go in an analytical approach. Like, well, is it appearance or not appearance? And if it is appearance, how is that produced? So this is the whole, uh, I would say, thrust of Buddhist psychology. And we're going to talk about that today. So I will go into, hopefully, I got so many slides. I mean, so much content. I prepare like 20 and we get through three. But so make sure we don't miss that. But the point is that everything's appearance we talked about last week. But then we have to sort of deconstruct that and actually analyze, and not just accept it, but to actually understand it first from an intellectual point of view, right? The intellectual point of view is through our study. And okay, this is how the mind works, and because the mind works and does it work, then you don't just accept it. Of course, you analyze that too, and you use your rational, analytical mind to also um, deconstruct that, if that's the word, or understanding, because that's the value where some of the depth comes from. One way we could say it's all appearance and meditate or contemplate upon that and seeing things as appearance. But what deepens that is the understanding of how that mechanism works, right? So, and understanding the opposite, which is our normal way of viewing things, which we don't see them as appearances, we see them as truly solidly existent. So it's also understanding that, how do I do that? So it's understand, both angles we need to have, at least to begin with, an intellectual understanding of that. And then, as we talked about, everything intellectual in Buddhist thought is actually meant for experience. And I say everything, and that's exaggeration, but the philosophy and the psychology, anything we talk about is great. We talked about, I think, where I mentioned the three levels of learning, which is first exposure to content. So we call that listening. but it's really like studying or getting the content. And the second is contemplating it. So it's not just accepted on blind faith. And it demands, I think a lot of people, a lot of us prefer blind faith. It's kind of easier. You know, it's just tell me what to do or tell me how it is or God take care of this. You know, it's kind of comforting. It just doesn't work. I mean, long term, you know, things happen. So we are under the sort of requirement that we have to work at this. And that's why it's kind of not for everybody in that sense. Although in Buddhism, I think you can see so many different levels. That there is the faith level. We would say there are people who can practice or be devoted merely on a devotional or a faith-based approach for a while, and that's fine. And you'll see that according to different cultures, right? Some cultures are more faith-based. Also, some people are more faith-based. But as the Holy Lama says, he says he often um, expresses gratitude that there's so many different religions and systems of thought because people's personalities are so different. You know that there is something available for kind of everybody. You know, so it's not to eliminate the value of faith-based approaches. It's just when we come from the point of view of what we're really seeking. And this is kind of different, right? Because ultimately, what Buddha's main concern is freedom from difficulty. That's its main focus. Ultimate freedom, not temporary freedom. And so it's going to be kind of frustrating that um, sometimes I think in Buddha's approach, it doesn't really offer temporary solutions, because the temporary solution can actually be a distraction from the ultimate solution. It's not that it doesn't want people to feel good, of course, but that's not the goal, to feel good in the moment. And a lot of us in this culture, that's the way we're designed, isn't it? I mean, that's our culture. Our culture, everything, if you look at, again, exaggerating, but everything really designed, like if you just watch television and watch the ads, it's all designed for temporary relief. All of it. Even the medical ads, for the most part. I mean, some are curative, of course, not to dismiss all the intense illnesses that people have. But if you're just primarily looking at Lama Yeshe used to say, if you want to understand psychology, look at the billboards. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Jessica and people online, I think, are having a hard time hearing you.
Okay.
Jessica just sent I'm wondering, can we adjust your mic? Do you think?
This mic?
Yeah, I'm just wondering because it almost looks like the mouthpiece is ending the wrong way.
Yeah, but we can hear.
We can hear it.
Yeah.
Okay, that might be.
Yeah, so that they can hear.
Jessica.
Maybe we could then turn the volume down on our speakers. Well,
I think that might help.
anyway, that's my long answer. Short question.
But that was fantastic. You asked like a really good question. And for me, I said,
For me, I prefer questions and answers.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of, but you can't just do questions. You have to get content. Are they hearing it now?
Let me ask.
Huh?
I'm asking.
Okay.
I think she can probably hear you speaking too, though. Let's see.
Okay. So in this little book that we have, it's in 4 chapters. I was going to try to do 4 chapters in 3 sessions, which is impossible because, I mean, it's possible. But so I wanted to get to, even though we didn't get that far in the first chapter, we got half. I wanted to jump to the second chapter, which is a Buddhist approach to mental illness, because I think people tend to have a strong interest in that. And so that's what we'll do this morning. We'll try to do. Just I am now. I'm all messed up. I messed up my.
Jessica says that's better, by the
Oh.
way.
Good. Messed up. Okay, so this was a talk that Lama Yeshe gave, I think, in Melbourne, Australia. I think. Did anyone ever, did anyone look? Yeah, Melbourne, Australia, to a group of psychologists, I think, probably other people were there, and he was being interviewed by, I think, a psychiatrist there. This is back in, I didn't look at the date, but before 1984. And so, we look at mental illness, right? This is what we call it. And Lama had said that mental illness, according to Buddhist psychology, is the kind of mind that does not see reality. So we're going back to last week, in a way, right? A mind that tends to either exaggerate or underestimate the qualities of the person or the object it perceives, which always causes problems to arise. A very interesting kind of a wide point of view, right? And then we're going to get more specific on this. But that's not the definition of mental illness in our modern psychology, is it? So let me read that again. The kind of mind that does not see reality. It never starts there with us, right? A mind that tends to either exaggerate or underestimate the qualities of the person or object it perceives, which always causes problems to arise. So, in the West, you wouldn't consider this to be mental illness, but Western psychology's interpretation is too narrow. And I think this is where we begin to make a little bit of a diversion from modern psychology, Western psychology, and Buddhist psychology. So the fundamental nature from Buddhist psychological point of view is a fundamental nature, fundamental is not the right word, the everyday nature of our minds is mentally ill, you know. And so in our culture, we don't necessarily say that. We think people who are dysfunctional because of their mental or cognitive abilities are the mentally ill. So right in there, we have to make a separation or make a distinction that what we're talking about when we talk about mental illness from Lama Yeshe's point of view and the Buddhist point of view is something that's much more broad, and it actually, infects every living being, actually. Of course, there are degrees, and the degrees are, uh, in some ways, yeah, the degrees do matter amongst the Buddhist point of view. So, one of the interesting, and this is maybe a little more faith-based, if you want to put it that way. There's some things in Buddhist psychology, Buddhist philosophy that do need to be accepted on the from the position of faith first. There are some things, that are not so easily accessible logically. But everything can be understood from a logical point of view, just about everything. Okay. One of the things that's hard though, is something like reincarnation. So reincarnation sounds totally faith-based, right? It's a belief or it's not a belief. But in our approach, we don't feel that people should accept it only on faith, that you can accept it on working with it. You can accept it on the level of logic or rationale. Okay, that's interesting because that's not explained in any other system that I know of. But so this is where I think I mentioned last week where we talk about doubt is good. Okay, doubt, there's afflicted doubt, we call it afflicted doubt. That's the technical word, afflicted doubt or deluded doubt or I don't know, wrong doubt. And then there's positive doubt. Okay, so there's positive skepticism and there's negative skepticism. The positive skepticism or the positive doubt we want people to have. Because the opposite of that, or not the opposite, but an alternative to that is faith, blind faith, which we don't really subscribe to or promote. Okay. So So what we say is that the healthy doubt is doubt of something with an open mind that it's possible. That's different than the skeptic's approach of it's doubt wanting to prove that it's wrong. It doesn't have the openness, perhaps. Not all skeptics, I mean certain skepticism, that leans towards doubt, leaning towards not that it's not true. So if a healthy attitude would probably be that reincarnation, I don't know if it's true or not, but I somehow think it could be. And I think it could be based upon, and a lot of it is resources. Like you trust a certain person, like a teacher, and they'll just tell you that, reincarnation is valid. Doesn't mean you accept it just because they say it. It means that it may be a worthy topic to research. Another one is karma, like a cause and effect. That's another one. But karma again, it's like yeah. So these are laws, for example, like the law of gravity, some hundreds of years ago was not considered a law, was it? Even though it was existing. So karma is like that. It's sort of a newer concept to us. But generally speaking, I would say, wouldn't you say that generally speaking, when we have the thought of karma, I don't know, when it first got introduced in Western language, maybe, instant karma and the Beatles and John Lennon and karma, and it started percolating through the vernacular, right? Through the common language. But what does it mean? I mean, how did people mean it when they said karma? Because this embedded us, unfortunately. Unfortunately, that narrative embedded in our minds, and you mentioned karma to anybody, they're gonna exaggeration, sorry, but for the most part, they're gonna have an idea that karma is this, and they're generally the general public, if they've heard the word, what do they think karma is?
What goes around comes around.
Goes around, comes around. Fate, right?
Right.
Yeah. That's kind of sad because where that saying comes from?
No.
Does anyone know where what goes around comes around where that saying came from? The bubonic plague.
And certainly, it does come around.
People would come into town and start coughing, and
Crazy.
they'd spread it from village to village. What goes around comes around. So that's karma, I guess. Okay, so that's not what karma. I mean, karma generally it means fate, but in fate or justice or something. So I'm not going to go into karma now. We can talk about it someday. But the karma when we talk about karma, we're talking about cause and effect. Better we use that word probably than the word karma. And even in science, there's cause and effect, right? I mean, law of cause and effect in physics and physical sciences. But that's not karma. The meaning of karma is for the most part, it's a mental law. It's a mental thing. Karma is a mental thing, not so much physical. Okay. When we talk about the physical, like if you develop an illness, people say, well, that's your karma, meaning cause and effect. Well, it's like, okay, well, you worked a lot with pesticides and now you have Parkinson's or something, right? That's karma, but that's not karma. That's not the karmic part. It is karma, but that's not the karmic part. So we divide into, not divide, we articulate it as conditions and cause. So working with pesticides is the condition. What was the cause that you got Parkinson's and your neighbor didn't? That's karma. Okay? That's the karmic part. Because if you get Parkinson's and the other person didn't, you're experiencing the result of Parkinson's, aren't you? You're experiencing the effects of Parkinson's, right? Why isn't that person? So those effects, the fact that that person's experiencing those effects is due to causes that he or she created. The conditions is different. The conditions is conditions. Because if the condition was pesticides, everyone should have Parkinson's because we're all been around pesticides. Again, exaggerated, but so that's not the karma. The condition, yeah. And we don't ignore conditions. We don't ignore conditions, but it's not the cause. And the cause can't ripen if you don't have the conditions. That's what's interesting. So you have to have some conditions too. But anyway, that's going off from the karma. Okay, so the kind of mind that does not see reality. So that's our base now. Not seeing reality, and not seeing reality then is the mental illness Lama Yeshe is describing. If someone is obviously emotionally disturbed, you consider that to be a problem. Okay, so that's for the most part, again, a generalization. For the most part, that's what we'll call mental illness or mental disturbance or mental disorder, is when someone is emotionally disturbed. Okay? Emotionally disturbed. So think that. So if someone is not emotionally disturbed, they're not, if you're a therapist, they're not coming into your office probably, are they? I mean, they might come in for something else, like coaching or something like that. But I'm talking about in a general sense, as a psychotherapist, your job begins when a person comes in the door. And people come in the door having some emotional disturbance. A lot of it's around relationships, of course, right? But it can be many things. So we have in the DSM-5, 274 different diagnoses, I think. I counted them once. And sub-diagnosis. So it's 274. Then if you don't fall into one of those, which most people would say they don't, or generally speaking, then you don't have a mental illness. Okay. But from Lama's point of view, when you're when you get a bill in the mail that you didn't know you had, like those toll roads things, when you drove in the fast track and you didn't know that you didn't have a little thing on your window, and then you get the bill for, I don't know, $30, and you get kind of upset. So Lama Yeshe would say your emotional disturbance is that a mental illness or not? But we don't think of it that way, do we? I mean, Jim, now we are. Why would he call that part of mental illness? Because the mind is disturbed. So, but if someone has a fundamental inability to see reality, to understand his or her own true nature, you don't. Oh, sorry. It's a funny sense. If someone is obviously emotionally disturbed, you consider that to be a problem. Yeah, and then you get the bill and you start ranting and raving, and everyone kind of stands back and you start getting really pissed off, and people kind of pull back a little bit, right? And then that person has a problem. But what about the person who's watching, who's just a witness to it? So from the Buddhist point of view, also that person also is mentally ill. That's completely weird, isn't it? Because you're saying, oh, you're just balance, go, chill, it's okay, I hope you pay it. But from Buddhist point of view, the person also helping also has a mental illness. Because when that person is relating to the other person, if we're gonna, and I don't ask that you accept this definition, but if the definition is that mental illness is a result of not seeing reality, when the friend is responding to the upset person getting the bill, that friend responding, do they see reality or not? And if they don't see reality, they're still stuck in mental illness. So what we're talking about, I'll get into the details of this in a few minutes, is we're talking about an overall broad frame of mind. Okay, it's a broad sense. It's a complete daily, moment to moment state of mind that is therefore considered or labeled mentally ill. And we can change our label about mentally ill. I mean, Buddhists don't use that word. Lama's doing a translation for us. Okay, which is what his unbelievable skill was. But if someone has a fundamental inability to see reality, to understand his or own true nature, you don't. You don't consider that to be a problem. The person who's trying to help the friend who's upset about the bill, we don't see that person, that friend, has a problem. Okay, so we're going to that now. Again, we are talking on a relative plane, also on a relative level. Yes, there are many levels of disturbance. Okay, all of them caused by not seeing reality, but we don't want to dismiss the fact that someone who, and again, this is a sorry stereotype of someone on the street who's muttering to himself and, trying to, who's homeless and trying to get money or something like that, schizophrenic. We're not saying that we're the same as that person, in that moment and in that emotions, because that person's suffering is different than ours. That person's reality is manifesting different. What we're saying is that we're not very far, because we don't see reality. We're not that far from that person's reality. We're not that far. I mean, did that person ever think that they would become schizophrenic? No. Did the parents feel that way? No. It was like all an equal playing field, more or less. I know there's variations, but isn't that weird? I mean, I think that's very strange. So how far are we from schizophrenia? Does anyone know how far you are from being schizophrenic?
Very close.
Huh?
That close, huh?
That close? I think so. We don't think we are.
No, we are.
We are, because that person, again, I'm generalizing. I have to keep saying that or not, or you know me by now. I have to generalize and make examples. But that person, before they were schizophrenic, felt just like us. That person's bipolar felt just like us before they're bipolar. And it suddenly
Put the
happened.
two of them together and you got absolute insane.
You got absolute insanity.
Bipolar and schizophrenia is a bad combination.
Yeah. Was saying that bipolar and schizophrenia are a bad combination. Yeah.
There may not be a good combination. I mean, that's the other.
There may not be a good combination. The point is, and we use these examples in extreme sense because they help us. But how many of you and myself have been schizophrenic? I have.
I mean, I use drugs, so.
Yeah. How many of you have been bipolar? I mean, that's easier. Yes. Even if it's for 10 minutes.
And
We lose it, right? We lose it.
It's a
We say,
spectrum.
I lost it. What?
it's a spectrum, so we could be somewhere
Microphone?
else and we may not know, like we are. Thank you, Dina. I'm saying it's a spectrum. It could be a spectrum. It's not a point where it's like, okay, beyond this you're schizophrenic and before this you're not. So we
Yeah.
could be like somewhere here and could be like misinterpreting our own reality that no, I'm not.
Yeah.
But maybe you think I am.
Yeah. So what is reality then?
Yeah.
We'll get into that. So this is a great, I think it's not for a few more slides. This is a great launching point to explain what the Buddhist idea of mentally unhealthy is. Do any of us know for sure that we will not become schizophrenic in this life? Do any of us know that? We don't, right? Or bipolar, or yeah. So the fact that we don't know that kind of implies maybe we have it in us. That's what's meant by mentally unhealthy in Buddhist psychology. It's not the manifestation only of what we are in this moment. It's the potential that we have to go insane, to be dysfunctional, completely unfunctional. And I think I'll go a little religious on you for a second because I think this is good jumping off. I'm going to go into faith-based something. When we think of again, I don't want to say generalizing. When we think of the schizophrenic, when we think of the someone who's so depressed and distressed, you lost someone close to them, or just whatever. We see that we experience it, and we see it as sort of a not sort of. We see that experience as being a much more suffering place to be than where we're at the moment. And none of us wish to be there. But we're not far from there ever. We're just a moment away. That's the problem. Okay. That's the Buddhist psychological philosophical challenge that we're trying to overcome. To remove the possibility, the lack of control. To remove the lack of control. And that lack of control is what's meant by the fact that we're not free. We have no freedom, actually. We have no freedom because we don't have the tools to prevent us from going into despair. You know, just look at our political situation. I mean, we do have a choice whether we get depressed by. We do have a choice, but we don't have much choice of what these people are doing. So we have to work really hard not to get depressed and not to get angry and not to get despair. What's these despair? Despair is not a verb, is it? I was despair. No, I feel despair.
Disparaged.
There's a word,
That's
disparage.
That's the word you're trying to use. Yeah. Disparaged.
Okay. Disparage. Is that what someone disparages you? I'm just
Yeah.
So, okay. So in Buddhist, so I was going to go into faith for a moment. So when we look at the Buddhist world, you know, the cosmology, we talk about that there actually being 6 different realms of living beings, not just humans. Okay, and we talk about you know, 2 celestial realms. One's very high, one's middle, and then we have the human realm. So those are often referred to as the 3 higher realms. Okay, then there's 3 lower realms, which are the animal realm and the spirit realm and the hell realms. Okay, that stimulates your Judeo-Christian biases. I don't know what well. But so we feel there's living beings live and dwell in 6 different realms, and we've dwelled in those countless times, all of them. The reason I bring this up is that if we feel that in any moment or any day we could become bipolar, schizophrenic, or, you know, it could happen, right? And it does happen to people. That's what's so amazing. It's just painful. It does happen to people. Millions, billions, I don't know. So what we say is that, so for the schizophrenic, because we'll take extreme examples, for schizophrenic, paranoid schizophrenic, if you were to step into his or her head, their mind, that's a hell realm. Okay? They are not human. Yes, they're human because their body's human and their mind is human. But the degree of their mental anguish is such a degree that we wouldn't say it's the common human reality or experience. Because all of us sitting here, we're not in the same, you know, we're not experiencing the same thing. But if you look closely, we're in a sort of similar mindset, aren't we? We're not in the mindset of a chipmunk. Okay? We're not in the mindset of a coyote. We're not in the mindset of a flea. Those are all animal. We're not in the mindset of a mollusk. We're not in the mindset of a, you know, some kind of fish. So all that's the animal realm, or ant. You know, the ant that's crawling along, it's in a mindset. It's having experiences. Just like we're having an experience right now. Okay? We're having an experience, right? And our experience defines the way we're experiencing defines us as human. The way that the rat is experiencing defines it as an animal. The way that the schizophrenic, if I can just elaborate or extrapolate, is experienced is a hell realm. Okay, so when we talk about the 6th realm, we're talking about 6 mental states. Really, we're talking about 6 mental states. Now, if you extend it to reincarnation, and if you were to pass away, and then your mind enters sort of a hellish schizophrenic state, you may not be born as a human. You may be born in a body that fits that mental state, which is what we call the hell realm, or the animal, you know, the animal could be animal, things like that. That's how reincarnation is determined by the state of mind that one has when they die, in large part, not only, but, you know. So that's why in terms of living in terms of the death process, you want to take care of people to create as much comfort and peace and confidence as you can, and not fear. And you don't want people around that are clinging to the person and crying and that sort of thing, because it can disturb the mind. The person grasps that last moments of their life or consciousness, and that has a big impact on their rebirth. How did I get here? I don't know. Realms. Okay. So Lama talks about reality, not seeing reality. What we do see, and it's a quote I often use, we see what isn't there, and we don't see what is there. That's appearances. We see what isn't there. What we see isn't there is solid, unchanging, independent, inherently existent things and people. We see what isn't there. And we don't see what is there. What is there is a moving, amorphous, empty of any inherent existence is what we do. We don't see that. That's what's there. We don't see reality. We see unreality. And the unreality we see appearances, but we don't see them as appearances. We don't see what is there, which is appearance. And we don't see. We see what isn't there. What isn't there is solid something. When we say appearance, it means not really solid, right? Not self-existent, not existing truly. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it does exist truly. Okay. So it's really important. So just to walk around day to day is say, well, everything I'm seeing isn't there. Just do that. But it doesn't mean there's nothing there. I don't see what is there. Everything I see isn't there. What I do see is, what I see isn't there. What I don't see is there. Okay. So the main culprit then we're talking about is ignorance. We call this ignorance. There's nothing else to call it. Why don't we see what is there? Why do I see what isn't there? What would you call that? What would you call that?
A deluded mental state.
Yeah.
Illusion,
Illusion. Yeah.
dreams.
Yeah. What's the mechanism in the brain or the mind that causes that?
Separation.
Separation, conditioning.
Preconditioning.
Conditioning. What conditioned it though? What's the cause of the conditioning?
Karma.
Karma. Well, let's not use the Sanskrit word.
The experiences of life.
The experiences of this life makes me see things that way. So it's conditioning, karma.
Okay.
But what causes the karma? What causes the conditioning? Does that have a cause?
Isn't that part of our upbringing? Our parents say that's a cushion, and we say, okay, that's a cushion.
So does that, so when the parents say, that's a truck, is it a truck?
If that's what they said, and that's what I learned, then yes.
Oh, so it's a truck, so everyone can ride
No,
around.
not everyone. Just me.
Oh, so you see what isn't there. Okay. What isn't there is a truck, right? So how do you define that that's a cushion? Because we all say it's a cushion. Anybody saying it's a truck?
No.
No. Okay. So, but you are.
Oh,
No.
his mother did.
His mother did. No, do you see?
It's her fault.
It's her fault. That's why Freud started there. Mother blaming. No, I'm not minimizing what you're saying. No, it's true. Actually, it's true. Because when we start looking for causes in terms of Western psychology, not again generalizing, I'm saying that a lot today. The primary or the foundation of modern psychology was the basis of the mother, right? Which developed into mother blaming. So the fact that I don't, the fact that I think about this, the fact that I don't like Brussels sprouts, and I get really irritated when I'm presented with them, is based on my mother, right? Because I develop a mental disturbance around Brussels sprouts. Okay. So now Ram and I are having a fight, right? That's based upon, so you're going to look at internally, well, you have this mother, so you have this problem because Rama looks like your mother. Well, it comes back. So the cause, is that cause or conditions? But we call it cause, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in the culture.
Well, it has one part one part that's causal, which is that there is Rama there. and
Yeah.
she's a woman. So
Right.
you're associating. So there is one part of that is that.
So that's a condition, because if it was a cause, no,
But I mean, the
it's
object is causal, isn't it?
the object
And
is,
she's the object.
what's the cause of me getting irritated in a fight with Rama?
Well, I mean, there's three. Are there three parts to it? I
Mhm.
mean, ultimately,
Which-
there's a causal part, there's an immediate part, and there's a dominant part.
So, is the causal part that I'm flashing back or projecting my mother onto her, my experience with my mother? Is that the cause?
Well, no.
So that's a condition,
When
right?
the cause, okay, go ahead.
But it's good. I liked that.
Yeah, totally.
So Patrick's very generous. He must trust me. One time I was in a teaching with Lama Yeshe, big teaching, about 150 people or something like that there. And my friend John Landau, he said, I mentioned this last week. He said, tell stories of Lama, but more mentioned about the effect he had on you. I thought that was interesting. So I was in a talk. Lama Yeshe, his style with me, he wasn't very nice. He's very loving, but not very nice. Yeah, he picked on me a lot. I think obviously I needed it. So we were in a teaching of 150 people. And sometimes I go to the teachings and I would sit behind a pillar. So he couldn't see me,
That would do anything.
Yeah, well, so I think I probably was behind a pillar. And so then so we did a teaching, and there's a series of teachings giving. And I think I was not paying attention, but that's not unusual. And all of a sudden I hear, isn't that not true? Isn't it, Karuna? Everybody, 150. And I'm like, and I said, well, as an English teacher, I gave the right answer, I think. I said yes. But that doesn't sound right, right? You're supposed to say, isn't that not true? Isn't it, Karuna? Something. You should say no, because all the negatives. I said yes. And he burst out laughing, because he had a big laugh. Burst out laughing, and everyone's laughing, and he starts picking, like stuff off of the throne and throwing it at me, like the fruit and stuff like that. And I thought that he says, and he goes, oh my God, my own English teacher doesn't even know English. And it's the worst. You want to dig a hole right down. And he did that a lot for me. So embarrassing. And so then just before he finished teaching, I finished the teaching, and then he said, okay, let's see if Karuna gets the right answer. Let's see if he figures it out. Tomorrow, we'll ask him at the teaching tomorrow. Do you think he could go to sleep that night? And I was so anxious the next day. I'm just incredibly anxious. I just, God, I just can't face that. I can't face it. They often describe the guru as a freight train. Just doesn't stop. Takes long, it just goes right through you. So I remember just tortured. I got to go up to this teaching at 7:30 or whatever time it was. And I remember lying on my bed and just like kind of almost sweating and just so anxious. And then, I'm not saying any realization, I don't mean like that. But then I saw it just as stuff. It didn't have any reality it was there. But the meaning that I projected onto that experience was false. It's just meaning. Another person might project the meaning that I feel so happy that Lama did that. And they feel so relaxed and excited to go to the teacher. Another person's like, not even think about it. Same data, right? So data is neutral. So Rama getting angry at me is neutral, actually. Right? But the moment I ascribe meaning to it, that it's because of my trauma with my mother, we've changed the narrative. And we do always have a narrative. What Buddhist psychology and Buddhist philosophy say is have a more accurate, more proper, more accurate, truthful narrative. And we can't know the truthful narrative if we don't study. When I say study, I don't mean, you gotta become an academic. I don't mean that. If you don't get the content, listening, contemplating, meditating. Meditating means experience. Listening means study, getting the content. Contemplate means mulling it over and thinking about it. Okay? So with reality, that's what we do. And by the way, as a Buddhist of like 50 years, I still study those texts. I can't say every day, but frequently, the texts on reality. And fully, most of what Buddha taught, they say, was the sole purpose for the student to discover reality. Isn't that interesting? So all these things about the teachings of reincarnation, karma, kindness, love, compassion, exchanging self with others, reincarnation, rebirth, all that is really designed so that the student develops the insight into reality. But we're all at different levels, right? We're all at different places. Everyone is at their own place. So what's right for you is not right for me. What's right for you is not, it's not. But there's this corpus of teachings that give some general, more than general, but kind of give good blueprints. And you might be reading the same thing I am or studying, but what resonates for you is, oh, finally got this thing about all beings being my mother. Wow. And I'm reading the same text or saying that now that didn't do it for me, but what I got, oh wow, about this precious human life. That's the beauty of the Buddhist thought, is there's just such an abundance of approaches and interventions. Right. So, oh, by the way, what happened when I went the next night?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I had this relief. I wasn't totally relieved, but this kind of break. It's all just stuff, and it's my reaction to it. So I went up and I sat through this teaching. Yes, I wasn't comfortable. I was squirming because any moment Lama would break from his script and lash out. I went through the whole teaching. I'm like, oh, he's dedicating the merits at the end, and I made it. And he's about to get up, and he said, "Oh, it looks like Karuna got the right answer." I get chills now. I get goosebumps when I think about that. See, experience. So I had some kind of experience. It was fun. That was due to his skill. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we got time. Is there anything online? Any questions? Or anything?
I don't think anything's come up.
Must be confusing. We see what isn't there and don't see what is there. You know that this is not there, right? People know these sidewalk drawings. There's no slab of concrete there.
There's no hole either.
Huh?
There's no hole, no septic.
No hole either.
Yeah.
We see what isn't there. What isn't there is a hole.
It's an illusion.
Yeah, and that's how this is. Okay, that's how this is. So the main culprit is ignorant, what we label as ignorance. Okay, it's a kind of not know. I'm gonna get technical for a few minutes if you don't mind. And if I lose you, then just catch me. What are we ignorant of? Okay, two things. We're ignorant of what we call conventional reality. This stuff we're here now, this stuff, your house, your job, our families, our meeting together here, this room, the pillars, the altar, all this stuff, the voices. That is all existing, and that is what we call conventional reality. Okay, conventional, relative, conventional reality. So this does exist. It doesn't exist the way we're experiencing it, though. Okay, that's very important. So we are ignorant of how this exists, this conventional reality. And generally, when the Buddhists talk about conventional reality, they're talking about what we're missing are the actions and their effects. So it's karma. Okay. We do not see anything happening. I'm generalizing. I should speak for myself. I don't see anything that's happening in front of me as appearing as appearing as action and their effects. But there is nothing happening right now, that isn't a series of causes and effects. That's conventional reality. And we don't even see that, do it. So when we meditate, we should meditate on what is it that I do see? And what we do see is three things. I mentioned last week. What we see is three things. We see everything as unchanging. We call that permanence. It doesn't mean permanence in the usual use of the word. Permanent, well, the options. We don't see things as impermanent, which is what they are. And impermanence is, the definition is that which is produced. Let's leave that one for a minute. A better way of saying is that which changes moment to moment. Anything that changes minute to minute changes second to second. Anything that changes second to second changes nanosecond to nanosecond. Anything that changes nanosecond to nanosecond changes, I don't know what the word is. You can't have big change without little change. Impossible. So it's not like, because if you say, like this Gompa, it's here and then in 100 years it's gone. So we call that change. But what we don't recognize is that 100 years from now gone, what's happening right now. There's no way you can have something permanent and then you have a permanent ending. Permanent means not changing moment to moment. So is everything in our experience changing moment to moment or not? I just want to know.
Yes.
Does anyone see that? No. I mean, people do. There are beings that do see that, of course, but we don't. So we're not seeing reality. So that's one thing we're seeing. That's one thing that's there that we don't see. We don't see what is there. And one of them is we don't see impermanence. So when you're in an argument with your friend or your partner, how are you seeing that experience when it's happening?
Just different realities, same situation.
Are you seeing it as permanent or impermanent?
Permanent.
You got it?
Immersive in the moment.
You just see it as not changing. Yeah, immersive. It says permanent. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
If you saw it impermanent as it is, at which place do you get angry at the person?
Interesting.
So it's like water. River looks like it's not moving from far away or something. When you get close, it's moving. At what point is the river? If something's moving, where's the thing? It's just a stream of movement. So if you and I have an argument, even take something gross. Like let's say you're backing out of when you're leaving, and you back your car out and hit my car. At what point does it happen? Philosophically, we know, and we can get to the place where you can't actually find the moment the car actually hit and pissed me off. What point do I get angry? When you haven't hit it quite yet, when you hit it and push it in, when you pull back. So that point I got angry is gone. But that's not how we see things. That's what ignorance is of relative conventional reality. Okay, and there's two other things that are always there too. Not always there, but generally. That one I just talked about is impermanence, moving moment to moment. So our psychology is fixed in a dysfunctional way. That's what's amazing. It's already dysfunctional. That's what the Buddhists call mental illness. The other one is we see the same things as existing independently on its own. Okay, so when I look at you, you look at me, this cup, then this cup, this mug, right? It appears to exist independently on its own. And if it's independent, right, it means it's not dependent. I know this is again philosophical, I get that. But if it's independent, it's mutually exclusive of dependency, right? Can something be independent and dependent? Never thought of it before? I mean, it's important to think about. So when Patrick's car hits my car, I'm seeing his car or him as something existing independently. I can start getting an argument with you. At that point, I see you independently, right?
Mhm.
But is he independent or dependent? That's important. Can't be both. Got to become comfortable with the fact they're mutually exclusive. You have to become comfortable with that. They either are independent, he either is independent or he's dependent. Which one is it? I know you're going to say dependent because you agree with me.
Yeah.
But the way he's dependent is fascinating. It's not it's incredibly complex. Not complex like intellectually, but then the degree of dependency is phenomenal. Okay, one thing is he gets out of his car, he's got his brown jacket on. And I look at his face. Is he apologetic? Is he going to be argumentative? See, whoa, wait a minute. If we're going to have argument, I'm already dependent upon how I see him. That's just one little dependency, right? Now, how I see him is also dependent because I say, yeah, oh man, he's so arrogant. He's blaming it all on me. If you had seen where you were going, right? So wait. So I'm gonna get angry and we're gonna have a fight. But that's dependent upon, I see him independently as an angry guy or a blaming guy. And yet, how do I have that information? How did I get that information? First of all, it's happening in a period of like 10 seconds. The impermanent one we already dealt with. The guy who hit me and the guy who came out of the car are not the same guy anymore, are they? They're a continuum, but it's not the same guy. It's already changed countless times in that minute. So that's one thing that's wrong. Now we're getting to the independent-dependent thing. And I see him independently, but in fact, can I see him at all? How do I see him? Isn't my seeing him dependent on something? No? What's it dependent on? My definition?
Your perception.
My perception? What am I perceiving him with?
Anger.
Well, I'm perceiving with my eyes, right?
Experience.
I don't have anger yet. I have it, but I don't have it yet. Because I see the color, the shape, his body's like this coming at me. Is that all experienced through the vision?
Memory.
And he's yelling or accusing, and I'm experiencing it through my ear organ. So let's say you're yelling at me. Where is the sound? Where's the sound of his criticism or anger? Where's the sound? I say it's him. He's pissed off. But where's the sound that I'm interpreting it that way? Where is that sound being experienced?
Your mind?
Yeah. It's in my mind, but I think it's in him. You see all these dependencies that are going on? And then I think, oh, it's Patrick. I like Patrick, and then I don't get angry. What's that dependent on? Same sound. Yeah, it's something in my mind. So same sound. You see your sound saying, why didn't you look where you were going, right? And my wife is with me and she's getting pissed off. And I'm there and I go, oh, it's Patrick. He's a really nice guy. Dependent on my experience with you before, the imprints on my consciousness that remember that. So many dependencies, aren't there? How many of those do we experience though? None. We just experience as an independent guy coming at me. And this happens when you make a cup of tea. It happens when you're in your sleep. It happens when you're dreaming. It happens when you're dying. It happens when you're born. It happens when you're going to work. It happens when you're driving. It's all that way. Everything we see as permanent. Everything we see as independent. And the last one is, I'm not going to go into it though. The last one is monolithic. And monolithic means not having parts. Patrick is nothing but parts. And his parts are parts. And my mind is nothing but parts. Because each of the experience, right? I'm experiencing is parts too. Because the impermanence thing. Part and part and part. But I don't see it that way. I see this really existent the way it appears. Okay. Too much, huh? Is it too much?
No, that was good.
It's a you gotta, and now the trick is, how does that apply to our psychology? Let's see, I'm gonna jump some slides. Sorry. Okay, well, I'll just define this ignorance. So that's because of ignorance. So in Buddhist psychology, there's only really one diagnosis: ignorance. Of course, it manifests as countless array of mental disturbances. But ignorance stimulates these internal mental disorders. Okay, so we do have mental disorder. In the Buddhist psychology, they talk about them as afflictions. And sometimes we say that there's 6 primary afflictions and 20 secondary ones. That's like the DSM-5, saying there's 273 mental disorders. They're grouped into how many? 6 categories? 6. Mood disorders and psychotic disorder. Behavioral disorder. I think there's 6 or 8 categories. Hey, it doesn't matter. So, so just so you know that the translation goes that the ignorance is the primary root mental disorder. Okay, but then yes, we get angry, we get jealous, we get bipolar, we get schizophrenic, those are the effects. Those are the effects of ignorance. Okay, now it gets very deep. It's not so simple. Because the ignorance is always there. It's always there. And so when we become bipolar, that is an effect, isn't it? It's a result. If you think about it, you're feeling extremely manic or depressed, whatever it is, and you lose, actually, many bipolar people in those manic phases just completely lose touch with reality, conventional reality. So but when we're in that state, or depression, say, the interesting thing about Buddhist psychology is that it does care that you're feeling depressed, but it doesn't really care. Because it's an effect. It's like the difference between when you have that bag of microwave popcorn and the kernels are in there, right? Those are like the causes. Once you pop it, you can't make it into the kernels again, can you? That's the effect. We spent all of our time trying to deal with effects. We spend not much time on dealing with causes. So we're talking now in terms of a mental approach or a psychological approach to be happy. What we do for the most part, is we're dealing with effects. So we feel some discomfort. So like thirsty, we make a cup of tea. But the tea isn't sweet enough, an effect. So we put some more truvia in, sugar, right? Now I feel better. Now I'm happy. That's how we live our life, okay? So we're always trying to manage effects. And then if we say, oh no, I'm trying to take care of the causes, that's why I'm, I don't know, that's why I'm getting a softer mattress. So I wake up with less sore back or harder mattress. So I deal with the causes, but it's generally effects to create a sense of comfort because of why. So ignorance is not just not knowing something. It's not just not knowing no, it's just not knowing impermanence is there. It's not just no, that's half of it. I don't see impermanence. The problem with the ignorance is that then it creates its own definition. It's permanent. This is very important to understand because it not only experiences things wrongly, it then creates a wrong interpretation. Okay? So there's nothing that exists solidly like this. So this cup, we not only we don't see the impermanence, movement, dependency in parts of this cup, we then project onto it partlessness, permanence, and independence. So you got to understand, not you, I don't mean it that way. We have to understand that it's not just seeing things wrong. We then project. That's the appearance thing that we talk about. So we see things wrongly. We don't become aware of that. We don't know that. And then we project onto a wrong definition, not wrong perception. When we develop our meditation practice, one begins to see the wrongness. One begins to see the rightness too. So through meditation practice, and I'm talking about at the experiential level, one will perceive impermanence. You will have the experience of impermanence because meditation means experiential. Direct perception. Maybe that's a better way to say it. We develop direct perception. That means experience, which is how realizations happen. Realizations really don't occur until we have direct perceptions of these things. So we have a direct perception of the cup being impermanent. First, for most part, you have a direct perception of the mind being impermanent, which is interesting because we see also the mind as being permanent. We have a direct perception of the mind being parts as opposed to partless. We have a direct perception of the mind being dependent and not independent. So you watch this dependent arising in the mind. What's the effect of that, by the way? Do you think? If you're having that meditation practice, that meditation experience, what is the effect?
Equanimity.
Yeah.
Less quick to act.
Less quick to react to things. Less quick to react to things. What's that more of?
Peace.
Yeah. Equanimity, peace, flexibility,
Compassion.
compassion. Because flexibility and peacefulness are mental states, aren't they? Those are healthy states. That's not mental illness. That's why the meditation experience, in other words, is the direct intervention to this mental illness that we have of ignorance.
And dependency, you really start to feel more connection, the connectedness,
You feel more connection with
everything.
everything. So ego grasping. Okay, so we'll go through this ignorance real quick, and I'm gonna go back to Lama Yeshe before we finish. Well, this is Lama Yeshe, but it's my interpretation. So ignorance is not just non-knowledge, not knowing something. It also conceives the opposite of correct knowledge. It's ego grasping. It's conceiving oneself as inherently existent. I am this. I know I'm this. Whereas really nominally existent, or just by name, this I like when I talk about I, I'm talking about the sense of self. Like if I say Rama's, oh, he means me. You don't say, oh, he means me, right? We say Patrick. None of us say, oh, he means me. Patrick does. That's the sense of I that we're talking about. Sense of self. And when what do you hold different? But this sense of self is incorrect also. This sense of self, just like the cup, we perceive it as being permanent. We perceive it as being independent, not dependent, and we perceive it as being monolithic, one solid entity. Okay? When we see that the I is not, or the self, the identity is not that, the effect is flexibility, peacefulness, equanimity, and wisdom. Wisdom. And wisdom actually, that perception is wisdom. And that wisdom is the key to compassion, love, equanimity, happiness, joy, non-harmfulness, all those things, selflessness. I'm gonna leave these. So ignorance compels. Okay. Okay, go back to Lama Yeshe for a minute. Human problems are more than just emotional distress or disturbing relationships. In fact, these, I think that's supposed to say they are, these are, I think so say, these are tiny problems. Let's look at that again. Human problems are more than just emotional distress or disturbing relationships. So the emotional distress of the political situation, from Lama's point of view, these are tiny problems. We say they're big. What's happening in the world, right? For the most part. Well, not that they're small, but in this context, it is as if there's this huge ocean of problems below, but all we see are the small waves on the surface. So when we talk about modern or Western psychotherapeutic approach, for the most part, we're talking about dealing with the tiny waves on the ocean. Yes, there is an approach, like what's underneath that. Of course, psychology is looking at what is the cause, what's underneath it. Unfortunately, they're not quite there yet from a Buddhist point of view, from a Buddhist psychological point of view. They haven't got it, but they're trying, they're getting there. Okay? So they're going a little bit under the waves. But he says, we focus on those. Oh, yes, that's a big problem, while ignoring the actual cause, the dissatisfied nature of the human mind, the dissatisfied nature of the human mind. Meaning that in general, or its nature, it's not its true nature, but our everyday nature is that we're dissatisfied. If, it's funny when you think about it, we could make the argument in each instant we're dissatisfied. Because the moment we're satisfied, it begins to fade. So what's that? I'm satisfied with my cup of coffee. Like this cup of tea, I was satisfied, but it goes cold. When did it start going cold? Right. So I take the first sips, I think I'm satisfied. But inherent in that is dissatisfaction, isn't it? Because it's not going to maintain. What kind of mind is that? What kind of reality, what kind of existence is that? That's what we spend our life on. That's what Lama is saying here. That's the real mental illness. But it's fundamental is the problem. It's not necessarily experiential. I mean, it's experiential when you go and become more self-aware and mindful, and then you experience it. But just in a general sense, it's just inherently there, so to speak. I'm using inherently as in a common sense. So because of ignoring the actual cause, that means that dissatisfaction, because we don't focus on the actual cause, the dissatisfaction is going to come back. That condition is considered suffering from the Buddhist description. That is nature suffering, which is kind of depressing. Because we are never satisfied. We never stay in satisfaction, let's put it that way. He says it's difficult to see, but we consider people who are unaware of the nature of the dissatisfied mind to be mentally ill. Their minds are not healthy. Then someone asked, Lama, how do you go about treating mental illness? How do you help people with mental illness? He says, my way of treating mental illness is to try to have the person analyze the basic nature of his own problem. Analyze, see that? That leads to meditation, by the way. I try to show him the true nature of his mind so that with his own mind, he can understand his own problems. If he can do that, he can solve his own problems himself. Wow. And again, this is one of the maybe less attractive parts of Buddhism for people, is that there's no one's going to save you. I mean, it's so much easier to have a faith-based belief. I mean, we even bring that to Buddhism, where we can say, oh, the Lama is going to save me. Buddha is going to save me. We do bring that. That's our training. Maybe it's not training, maybe it's something inherent to people. Maybe it's not just, maybe it's not just,
Sopa said it was really important. I think they all think like guru devotion is very important, right?
guru devotion is number one
Right. So
in the practice.
But ultimately, if you're not at the level of the guru, you have to have some faith that they're doing stuff that you, and even though you can see all the things that they're doing, you're like, hey, this person's really got it together, whatever. The advice is good advice, but at the same time, you have to have some. There has to be an element.
You need a guide, you need it, I mean, yeah, you can't learn how to build a cabinet without someone.
So you have to put a little bit of faith in your teacher
Right.
if they're going to show you.
A lot of faith, but that's a whole different topic.
Yeah.
And we teach, sometimes the whole guru devotion, guru yoga part is many weeks of a course that we teach. But I want to speak to that because I think it's the number one. It's a foundational practice in Tibetan Buddhism, but we have to qualify it because for the Tibetans, again, generalizing, they understand what that means. But us Westerners, we don't understand what it means. I'm generalizing. Again, it can turn to faith-based. The guru's going to save me, right? Like that. Lama used to say. But really, it's important for us Westerners to really get the right understanding of what the Guru Yoga, Guru devotion practice is. Traditionally, at least in terms of the practice of advanced meditations in Buddhism, in terms of the Vajrayana, it would take 12 years to develop the trust between a student and a teacher. 12 years. We go now, we take an initiation. He's my guru. You don't even know anything about him. How do you know he's those things? We're so naive here. We think, oh, he's a Lama or Rinpoche or Tulku. And we think he's Buddha. I'm sorry, but these times are really degenerate. I want to say degenerate. These times are degenerate. Don't believe Kali Yuga. Don't believe anything about that guru until you experience it. And you should. So I'll tell another story. So I was like that. I was maybe a slam. But before I went to Nepal, I had been practicing, yoga, Hinduism for a couple years. It's like senior year of high school. I'd gotten sick of not sick of, but psychedelics weren't working anymore for me. And I went to a yoga retreat, fell in love with, I became vegetarian, stopped smoking, stopped doing drugs, all that stuff. In one weekend, I lost all my friends. Because in high school, all your friends, what are you doing? You're partying. And my house was kind of, everyone would come over and, do those things. So, and then I had a falling out with that tradition after a few years. So I went to Nepal reluctantly at first, because originally I was going to go because I was so interested in Hinduism, finding my guru, going to India, sneaking into India, finding a guru like that. And I always had a very interesting fascination with the guru. Ever since Be Here Now, Ram Dass's book. That was my seminal initiation. And so I went anyway to know. And then so all of us students were living with Nepalese families, learning language, doing our research project. And one of my friends, his project was art, and he was learning how to paint these tonkas like that. And he lived with a master tonka painter he was a son of an incarnate Lama. So his dad was an incarnate. So my friend lived with this master painter and his father and his brother as well. And the father was an incarnate Lama, a Rinpoche of the Nyingma tradition. He wasn't a monk, but he was a Lama. He held many lineages and teachers. And I went, and so they invited me, my friend invited me to come and meet him and went over there to see, just visit him and look at his Tonka painting practice. And so I had lunch with the family. And so this is the first Rinpoche or Lama I ever met. I did go to a lecture of Chogyam Trungpa in Los Angeles, but this is the first time I met personally. He didn't speak English, but the son spoke good English. So I asked him, because I had this fascination with the guru. right? And I think I asked him, how do you find a guru or, something like that? And he said to me, when you find a guru, you examine him, you test him, you question him, you doubt him. And if he shows something, there's some kind of mistake in his answers, nail him to the wall like a fly. I love the Tibetans. Nail him to the wall like a fly. Now, of course, not literally because they don't kill. Can you imagine that was the first teaching I had on Guru devotion? So remember we talked in the beginning about open doubt? Yes, this is one of those things. You come with doubt with an open mind. Doubt with belief, leaning towards believing. But don't come in believing. I don't care. Even if, sorry, I'm going to get probably crucified for this. I don't care if everyone, you got thousands of students, everyone telling you how amazing that Lama or that, there's female Lamas too. I don't care how amazing that is. It's really, this person's a Buddha. Come in open-minded. Also, you may not have karma with that person, or connection, which is important to know. You can't force it. Well, everyone else says, he's a guru, or he's a Buddha. No, I don't feel it, but there must be something wrong with me. It's not smart. Sorry. It's one of my soapboxes. I have an issue with this thing. Obviously, an agenda. I do have an agenda though. Because I see so many people, it's painful. People see, who are led and then they commit and then they're let down, when they could have maybe known. I don't think we had to have this talk, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And also Tibetans know this culturally. They don't get fooled by it. There's, I don't want to say bad apples. It doesn't say me like that. But, there's variations, right? I mean, not everyone, it's not either you're enlightened or not enlightened. It's a path. It's a process. Even for the Tibetans. Anyway, sorry if I came too strong.
When you say that religion and Buddhist philosophy, why? Wouldn't you say there's Buddhists, and not to make discrete categories, but Buddhist religion and Buddhist philosophy, and there's a lot of Buddhists in the world.
Yes.
All of them are not
Right.
trying to understand
Academic scholars.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it seems Buddhism hasn't solved that issue.
Yeah, I think that because Buddhism has solved the issue of
Faith, devotion, sort of putting.
I think because faith is also useful. Faith is a positive. It's one of the virtuous minds. We talk about psychology. The afflictions, and then there's afflictions, and there's healthy afflicted minds and healthy minds. Faith is one of them. But like any healthy mind, it can go to an extreme of being negative. So I think that I like the question because I often start some of these courses that I teach on understanding the cultural development or evolution of Buddhism. So when we think about Buddhism think about 2,600 years ago in some village in India, what that looked like then. It wasn't a modern society like advanced, yes, but not technologically the way we are. And so, and then, this area of India, whatever that must have been like, it spread, to Sri Lanka. It spread as far north as Russia over the millennia, as far east as Sumatra, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Nepal, Tibet, Afghanistan, Pakistan. And all of those cultures did not become the same as India, right? They stayed what they were, but then the Buddhism embedded itself or integrated itself, which I think is a beautiful kind of thing that happened. I think, this is my interpretation, but I think that when you went somewhere like Sri Lanka, which I think originally was a more Brahman, Vedanta based, Hindu based, if you want to say that. And then it evolved into a Buddhist. I think in terms of, and I'm generalizing again, but Hinduism has a lot of devotional qualities to it, practices, right? I think that then it adapted to the culture. Buddhism just morphed into um, the Sri Lankan culture. You know, you go to Japan, and this is where I wish I studied more, but I look at Japan as maybe being a very different kind of, I'm again projecting because I don't know that much, but I think of it, Japan as maybe somewhat more intellectual or like parts of China with Taoism. Buddhism kind of adapted with Taoism. It didn't change Taoism and it didn't change Buddhism. It more became complementary. And so for the mindset of those people, again, I don't know, but seem maybe more of an intellectual or more of a less devotional approach, then you find the Buddhism there as having that quality. There is faith too, because we can't give up faith, in my opinion, because how are we going to you have to have some faith. You have to have faith in what the person is teaching. You have to have some faith in the teachers, like he knows something, but you can't have total faith. But then as you develop, you have to have some faith that Buddha exists. There's an enlightened mind. And we talk about Buddha, we're not talking about it in the sense of God, but it is a being. And there are many countless beings, I hear, that have attained Buddhahood. So that means there's countless Buddhas. So you might identify because of karmic connection with one particular enlightened being. I might have a connection with different enlightened being, but you need some faith, right? I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but you need faith that what they're but they say in Buddha who say faith based on reason. Faith based on reason, not faith based upon blind trust. So the reasoning can be is wow, okay, I don't know much about Buddhism. I'm going to read some of this text. And then you develop some sort of confidence that it works. And that's the faith that you might read another text. And then you look to who wrote the text. And then it develops a sense of confidence, maybe is a better word. Maybe confidence is a good word for this kind of faith. Does that answer your question?
There was a question in it,
More of a comment, yeah. I think it's personal too. Personalities are different. I think some personalities work very well with faith, and that's maybe because we don't want to make it all intellectual either. The point in Buddhist thought is you don't abandon the intellect. Maybe that's better. You use it as well. And I know that in many faith-based religions, you give up the intellect. That's dangerous with you. I didn't get very far, did I? Anything online, Diane?
I didn't see anything come up.
Isn't it true that, with a guru, they're going to empower you to go within, and also that you're going to have confirmation? Not necessarily that your material is going to get better, but that
The people online can't hear us.
well, maybe I should just speak from my own experience, but what I have found, and I had some big lessons with this also.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found now is that a true teacher is going to empower me to have I don't want to say that my human life's gonna get better, because that was a trap also.
Mm.
But that I'm gonna have awakenings or realizations or expansion. I don't even have the words, but that experience that you shared,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have an experience like that with a true teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And my trust is gonna grow from that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not going to elevate themselves and say, I know and you don't know. It's gonna be humble, but it's gonna be real.
That's see, the mindset you're describing is healthy. It's like going to a doctor these days. We have confidence, but I think sometimes now we don't have the level of blind faith in doctors like we used to have, because cultures change. It's a testing period. it should always be a test, not always, but it's a testing period for a long time. Like I said, in the Tantra tradition, it's 12 years. So maybe in this day and age, at least give it a couple years. And I mean, I come from sort of a unique space because I have a lot of contact and interaction with many traditions and people who have teachers, and I've seen some disappointment. You know, too much, maybe. And it's not a lot. I mean, you know, I'm talking about majority. It's a very small, tiny percentage. Tiny. But that's painful. And we should never give up our rational mind in that sense. We do, you know, we give up, well, it's the guru, so I guess, you know, I'm wrong.
I totally get everything you're saying, but I
Maybe I'm being too extreme.
No, I hear what you're saying. And ultimately, you know, the original point that I was making when I heard what you were saying and kind of jumped in and said, but what about this? Isn't even so much about giving your keys to your car to this person that doesn't need your car. You know what I mean? What I'm saying is that kind of more what she was just saying is about if that we need to have these realizations if we want to, you know, ultimately if we want to, we need, and what you've been talking about a lot today seems like even kind of an advanced realization. There was a lot of talk about like right view kind of stuff, which is like kind of almost advanced beyond a lot of the other stuff you know, that we need to realize before we even realize that. But I love thinking about that, and I'm obsessed with it, you know. And when I think about like, you know, the states of mind and how ultimately if we want to have a Buddha mind, that we're going to have to trust in the perfection of wisdom, which is all this stuff.
Yeah.
But that ultimately, how am I going to get there if I don't at least put in place some picture of what that looks like, which is going to have to be a Buddha guru kind of thing. And I'm going to know full well that I am that Buddha guru the whole time. So I'm going to put this thing in place.
Yeah.
Because I have to have devotion, because devotion is where the quickness is going to start happening.
That's right. Yeah.
And this is what I've learned, and I'm trying. That's kind of what I was.
So devotion, I think, two things. I want to thank you for reminding me of something.
Yeah.
Devotion means connection. Devotion is from connection. And when you have a connection and you have an experience. And then you develop trust and you have another experience because your trust goes, you know, you don't trust other areas. So it has to go deeper and deeper, right? And that's from your openness, that's devotion. And devotion, I think, is connection. But the other thing I want you remind me of, this Lama Yeshe states over and over again when talking on this topic, that yes, you need a guide, just like you need a guide. But the guide is not the thing. He also over the guru is your own enlightened potential. And thank you for reminding me, because that's like the main thing. So your own enlightened potential. The beauty of Buddhist thought, and I was gonna try to get to it today. Next week we'll talk about when Lama talks about the true nature of the mind. You know, today we talked about the negative, untrue nature of the mind. But to say that the false nature of the mind implies there's true nature, doesn't it? And that true nature is what we're all striving for. That's the good part of this, you know? Because if we don't get some experience of touching the true nature part, how do you continue? What's the fun? I mean, it's not about flagellation. It's not about just, oh, let's feel bad, and then someday we'll feel good, maybe. No, it's juxtaposed with this quality of mind that has the potential for full awakening. And the moment we touch it, and over again develop it, the other stuff disappears. It's actually, that is the antidote. The true nature of the mind, so the true nature, I wish we had another half hour, but anyway, the true nature of the mind because we're already 10 minutes over. The true nature of the mind is clarity, the relative nature. It's complete clarity. It's not all this crap. All the crap is reflected, or all the relative quality, all the mental stuff, whether it's anger, jealousy, envy, including love, compassion, equanimity. They're all reflected in the pure nature of the mind. So leave today knowing that we have to continue that the nature of the mind is clarity. Okay, it's unstained. You know, the true nature of the sky is not blue. It's not cloudy, right? Because those are the other things in the sky. So our struggles, Patrick and me fighting in the parking lot, having an argument with your partner, getting a bill for unheard of, you didn't know you had these fines against you. Well, fast track, you know, or someone's sickness. So those are all the clouds in the sky. Those are not the sky. And it doesn't mean they don't exist. They don't exist the way they appear. The way they exist is as of clouds in the sky. And what do we see them as? Thunderbolts in the sky. Okay. When we begin, the antidote, you know, that we're trying to lead to, that we're trying to achieve, is familiarity, and familiarity with the clarity of our minds. So actually, the guru is the mind itself. And it's like you don't have to do much. You just have to get in touch with that quality of our minds. There is things that you do then that speed things up, but fundamentally, when we meditate, and develop the familiarity with the clarity of the mind, these things dissipate. Right? Can you imagine getting, I'm trying to think of Lama, for example of Lama. Oh, so when I was taking care of him when he was gravely ill, I mean, oh, it's terrible. And he would sit up in bed and he'd pound his chest like this. And he'd say, I did my best. And then he'd say, how many pills am I taking now? 10 pills. He never showed, I mean, he was in, I mean, for a normal person, and you know, he had a double-sized heart and heart failure, and who knows, heart attacks, what was going on, I don't know. He never showed that he was suffering. Body, I could see, the body was going through weird things. Never showed he was suffering. And then I remember coming in, he was in ICU for a full week, and then special ward in the hospital. We were in the hospital. He was in the hospital for a month. And I remember coming into his room one day. I mean, yeah, coming into his room one day. And our goal was to get him out of the hospital and into a private residence so he could recover to come to the States to have heart surgery, open heart surgery. So we were in Delhi for 2 months. He was in seclusion because he didn't want people to know where he was. And one day I came in, you know, because my shift was like 8 in the morning or something. And I came into to my shift, and I come in, and there's like 7 nurses sitting on the floor around him, you know, on their white uniform. And he has this really lovely countenance to him and smiling, and they're all like smiling. They just said, because of his quality, they didn't know what he was. I mean, he was a very renowned Lama, but they didn't know him. But just through his quality, he was giving them teachings. They requested I don't know what on teachings, and they sat for an hour or two before I came, and there was another attendant taking care of him at that point. But you know, we had someone all the time. sitting on his bed, laughing, smiling, giving his teaching for whom knows how long. And then he passed away a few months later. Okay, so that's good for now. Should we keep going till tonight?
Sure, let's go.
Okay, so thank you very much. We didn't do any meditation again, like the worst teacher. But you know, one thing, just if you can remember to reflect on appearances. If it's all appearance, then what should it be? Or, you know, what is it? It's like, what am I seeing instead of appearance? You know, just to have that, that's kind of just being mindful. When we talk about meditation, we don't talk about just on the cushion. The purpose of meditating on your cushion is so that you meditate when you're in your life. Right? The reason to meditate on equanimity or patience is so that when you're with your friends or partners or kids, that you're patient with them. So you can judge how well you're doing with your meditation. Okay. Thank you. And see you next week, people online. And
Thanks, Kurt.
We move the mask stand.
Sure. That'd be great. Thanks, Patrick.
Put the chairs of it.
Sorry.
I want us to put the chairs of it.
If you don't mind, that'd be awesome. If you can help, that'd be super, super cool. Thanks.